All right. So, we just had so much fun last week that we decided to do it again. We are back with more random movies. However, for today, we are going to be doing specifically horror movies. If you've been around the podcast for a while, you will know that we both are very much horror fans. We are avid watchers of the horror genre. I don't think it would be too far-fetched to say that between the two of us, we've probably seen the most movies in that genre if we were to compare. And so we just wanted to have some more fun. Uh, to get us started, we will be doing the reboot of The Thing from 2011, if I remember correctly. And if I'm not mistaken, this is technically a prequel to the original Thing, or I guess the original that was a remake. You can double check. You confirm me on that. This is technically a prequel, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's one of those where it is technically a prequel, but for all intents and purposes, it's sort of a soft reboot or a soft remake, sort of, because it covers a lot of very similar elements and a lot of similar themes.
Okay. Well, I will let you start us off.
So yeah, I am actually a defender of this movie. It was not very well received. It kind of is having a little bit of a resurgence now with horror fans, but at the time, at least, it was a very unpopular movie. I'm a huge fan of John Carpenter's The Thing. It's tied for my favorite John Carpenter movie with the original Halloween. And The Thing is one of my favorite horror movies just of all time. And then this, I didn't see it for the longest time. I had seen the John Carpenter's The Thing several times before I ended up seeing this one, mainly because I had heard so many bad things about it. And then finally I just decided to check it out for myself. And I really dug it. I mean, there it is somewhat, like I had said before, a soft sort of remake of the John Carpenter one. It follows a lot of similar beats, a lot of similar story elements, but it still goes in very different directions and is not afraid to sort of do its own thing. So it's got great actors in it. Joel Edgerton is the male lead, and I think he's a very underrated actor. So it's always good to see him. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the main character, and she's great. But I mean, overall, I mean, it does a lot of cool stuff with the lore. It kind of expands it a bit, gives a little bit more context. And the real thing to appreciate with this is it lines up so perfectly with John Carpenter's The Thing. Because if you recall, in John Carpenter's The Thing, there's all this, oh, what happened to these other guys? And there's all these little teeny details like where certain bodies are placed or what things, like what was done to certain things. And this movie takes very meticulous care to put all those things into place so it lines up nearly pretty much perfectly with John Carpenter's The Thing without any discontinuity. The biggest ding against this is the CGI. Obviously, John Carpenter's The Thing is known for its practical effects, which are incredible and probably the best practical effects we've seen in not just horror but film. And this film makes everything CGI, and it's bad CGI. It's an overuse of bad, that mid to late 2000s CGI, and it's sort of criminal because of what the John Carpenter's The Thing was able to accomplish. But to the movie's credit, there was an original cut that was all practical, and then the studio mandated that they do reshoots and make it all CGI because everyone wanted to get in on the CGI craze of this time period, which is a travesty. And maybe someday we'll magically get the practical cut of The Thing 2011. But yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie. I think it's very underrated. And if you're a fan of the John Carpenter one, you should check it out.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go on a little train here. So I apologize in advance for how long this rant may be. So I'm gonna start off by saying, as you know, I'm a huge special effects guy, and I have like insane respect for when people do it. However, I also understand the idea of with like a lot of the reboots where they're like, okay, well, we have the technology now, and we could, in theory, make it look more realistic to the modern fan who may not be either used to, we'll just say 80s special effects, or maybe they've been spoiled by other movies or whatever. So I don't necessarily fault them for trying, though I also am kind of on the side of the people who were like, "Oh my God, why'd they use CGI?" With that out of the way, um, as you probably know, the like late 2000s, early 2010s, when they were just rebooting every horror movie that even possibly came out around the 80s. Um, that time period, I don't know if it's because of nostalgia or what. I absolutely love it. I've been going down the list of rewatching the movies from that time, and I haven't done the thing yet. So my memory of this movie is still from when I was like 12 and enjoyed it. So take that as you will. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm as strong of a defender as you, just because I haven't seen it in a while. So it's kind of hard to defend from the 12-year-old's point of view. But I remember liking it. And yeah, I feel like every reboot or remake that came out in this time period was just absolutely shat on. And as I've said with like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, like I think it was completely misguided. I think people just hated to hate, or they didn't like that it was just the craze and that was what and everything was happening. So yeah, from like a pure nostalgia standpoint, I do really like the thing. I'm not necessarily defending it, but I can understand the thought of going with CGI, and so I don't know if I held that as much against the movie as some other people did. And as a kid, I thought Mary Elizabeth Winstead was super attractive, so that's just a plus.
Me too.
Isn't she Miss Ewan McGregor?
She is,
Okay.
unfortunately. No, just kidding.
Uh, um, so our next movie is the original Poltergeist. Have you seen that?
I have,
Okay.
yes. I have seen this movie one time, and it was not too long ago, so I still have a firm memory of it. I thought it was fine. As I have mentioned before, because we did a whole video about it, the whole supernatural haunted house possession subgenre is my least favorite subgenre of horror because I find it to be just very tropey and very cliche. And obviously, it's, on a technical, objective level, you can't really hold it against this one as much because it's one of the OGs that has since, cliched. But it's just hard to sort of come from that background and then watching this one. So it's not as much against the movie itself as much as it's just me and my mindset of when I watched it. But I just didn't find anything in it to be particularly, unique or stand out. I mean, some of the sequences are really good. Like it utilizes, speaking of special effects, utilizes special effects really well. Definitely has some iconic moments that I got to notice had been parodied in many other things before. I'm a huge fan of the Family Guy episode Peter Geist, which taught me the general premise of this. Um, but yeah, I mean the twist, the big twist reveal. I mean, it's a movie that's like 40 something years old. So like the big twist reveal of like, oh, they moved the grave markers, but not the graves, and like the sequence where they used real human skeletons actually um when she's in the backyard where the swimming pool's going to be. Yeah, I mean that's a good twist. It's very effective. But it was hard for me to get beyond just it's just another family moves into a new house that's haunted sort of thing and things go bump in the night, which is just not a genre I particularly care for.
Yeah, that's completely fair. This is another one where I would say I agree with you as far as your opinions. Like I said, when there's a super famous movie, I feel like it's my duty to at least watch it once so I can say I have. And Poltergeist is one of those where I give it its props. If I remember correctly, this was Toby Hooper's other big film besides Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Love him. So I'll give him props and all that jazz. But similar to you, the paranormal stuff isn't really my favorite. So there was already a high bar set, so to speak, because I wasn't necessarily like excited to watch it. I just knew I needed to. And also just doubling down on what you said, it's not like it's necessarily anything that actually, I'm sorry. I'm sure if I watched this in the 80s, I'd be like, "Oh my god, that's so cool. This totally like sets a new level." But because of all the stuff we have now, of course, it's going to be a different perspective. But I would put this in the category of completely respect it for what it is, but it's not one of my favorites. And I will
Yeah,
say
I
the
agree.
clown scene did creep me out even though I was like 16 when I saw it.
Yeah, I've never been scared of clowns. I never really got that. So I was able to see like, oh, I've seen that referenced so many other places, but nothing about this movie particularly scared me.
I'm not afraid of clowns. However, I am afraid of stuff under my bed. And
Very true. Very, very, very true.
yeah, so I like it could have been anything. It didn't have to be a clown. It's just the like I will definitely probably defend till I'm 80 the scene in the first Saw where the guy is in the closet and he's just staring at her through the peephole or like through the hole of the like that scene to this day still creeps me the crap out. I always make sure my closets are closed. I don't check under the bed, but like there's like
Yeah,
a part of me that still is like something's under there.
for sure, for sure.
The next movie is the original Hellraiser.
I have seen this is the one of only two Hellraiser movies I've ever seen. I've seen this and then the Hulu remake from a couple years ago. Um, Yeah, this one has also never been one that's particularly grabbed me. I appreciate that it sort of takes the supernatural subgenre and goes in a more like sort of like horror fantasy Lovecraftian, side of like cosmic side of things, which I really appreciate. There is some really cool lore in there. And it's been enough to intrigue me to want to check out some of the better sequels just to see some more of this universe. I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. But this original one, I read the novella by Clive Barker, The Hellbound Heart. Really, really good. One of my favorite horror novellas. And it was a pretty faithful adaptation because Clive Barker was involved. I think he wrote the script for this one, if I'm not mistaken.
He
But
did.
this
He
was
did
when
the first two movies and then was removed for the sequels, and that's why some people say they went down in quality.
that makes sense to me. But yeah, it's always good when a creator is involved in an adaptation of their work. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously being the first one, the least tame or the most tame of them, from my understanding. And you kind of get this sense of like Pinhead has sort of become the Hellraiser, like in pop culture. And then you watch this first movie and he's like barely in it. And there's some interesting history there, with like how that became a thing and how he's really not a significant part in the original and just stuff
Yep.
like that. So like, yeah, it's pretty subdued. It's pretty tame. Nothing about it I found like particularly memorable. I only watched it once, the one time before I watched the Hulu one before that dropped on Hulu a couple of years ago, but nothing really against it. Just one kind of like Poltergeist where I'd put in that category of like respect, but honestly just kind of like meh and not particularly memorable.
So this is our first disagree, but I already knew that going into it. Uh, it's interesting because, so just as like an example, everybody I've recommended Rick and Morty loved it. Everybody I've recommended Always Sunny loved it. Whenever I recommend people Hellraiser, it's like they don't love it. And to be fair, I get it. Kind of like you said, pop culture has idolized Pinhead, and since the first movie almost has nothing to do with him, I almost feel like the bar's set and they're let down. A lot of people call Hellraiser like the first Saw because of the chains and the sort of like torture porn aesthetic, and that's not really prevalent in the first movie. So like I totally get it why there would be a distaste for the first movie. Similar to you, I love the novella. The main thing I want to touch on is, and I guess this is kind of cool because we referenced the thing earlier. I have done the most intense research into this movie because of how to do the special effects of the guy getting his body back, and it's what got me into special effects. Ironically, this is the movie that did it. The the way that they managed to do all of the different like versions of him as he goes from like bone to getting his nerves to getting his muscles and veins and back to just below the skin and like all the different levels, just so cool. And maybe I'm slightly biased because I've done so much research and I just think it's so cool how the artist did it, and that like carries the movie for me. Like I understand there are some points where it like drags or whatnot, but at least for me, uh the entire franchise definitely not, but like that first movie, I put it up there with the other like slasher original movies as being one of the greats, and that that's just own personal opinion. I will also say for you and listeners who maybe have done the same thing you did, the second movie Clive Barker designed to be watched with the first one, similar to like Halloween 1, Halloween 2, where it's better if you watch them back to back. They're designed to be one movie the way that Carpenter did that one, and then for this, Barker designed so like we were just talking about, the slow parts of the first movie are almost non-existent in the second one, and the second one almost acts as like a super third act, so to speak, where it's just balls to the wall from beginning to end. And watching them together, I think, would give people a better appreciation for the first movie, or maybe make it a generally better viewing experience. I don't know, but I at least wanted to recommend it. If you never watched any of the other sequels, I would at least recommend watching the second one, because I think not only does it add a bunch more cool special effects, you literally journey into hell for like 4/5 of the movie. And so you get to see Barker's version of hell, and it's a very interesting version, in my opinion. It's not something that I think you would stereotypically see depicted in a movie of what hell looks like. He has a lot of cool creatures. Yeah, I don't know. I think that the it's at least worth watching the second one. But yeah, so moral of the story is I really like the first movie, but I've yet to suggest this to somebody who I would say liked it as much as I did after their viewing.
Yeah, that's good to know, especially check out the second one now because I remember the first one being very slow and kind of dull. And then I remember like the climax kind of being like a fizzle. Like it didn't really like lead to something like it didn't really crescendo to something particularly like memorable.
Yeah,
So yeah.
ironically, like how nowadays directors are told they get a part one and a part two, so they film back to back and whatnot. Um, this would be like a version of that where Barker pretty much was told you're gonna get a second one, so he already had like known what he was gonna do for the second movie, and maybe unintentionally did that with the first one. Like he never said it. I'm just making an assumption here, but the second one, um I'm drawing a blank on her name, but our final girl is in a mental hospital because she is telling people about all the stuff she saw, and no one believes her. And then everything just goes downhill from there, because then she can't tell what's real, what's fake. She thinks the doctors are all saying that that she's making it all up, but of course we know it's real. So I think they play with a lot of cool stuff, and the second one pretty much takes place entirely in that mental hospital and hell at different points.
Like Kirsty Cotton. I just
There we
looked it
go.
up.
Yes, thank you. I went to say Nancy, but then I remembered that was Nightmare on Elm Street, and then my brain went Nasty, which I guess is a mixture of Nancy and Kirsty. So I just was like, I don't remember her name. Um, have you seen The Hunt?
Is that the Blumhouse one from 2020?
Yeah, with Dennis from Always Sunny.
I have not seen that. Or I have not seen It's Always Sunny, I mean, so I don't know if that's the one.
Oh,
I believe it's
it's
this one,
with
right?
Emma Roberts.
Okay. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Yeah, no, I really like this movie. It got a lot of crap. It got a lot of hate. A lot of people were really upset at the messaging, and I think it's because it's like the best version, especially coming out in a year like 2020. It's like the best version of something with a strong political message, but the political message is basically like both sides are really dumb, and it makes fun of the left, it makes fun of the right, like it is sort of caricaturing and satirizing both sides into like the worst version. It's like they caricaturize and satirize each side based on what the other side thinks that they are. So it's like the people on the right are like what the left thinks the right is, and then the people on the left are what the right thinks the left is. And so it's really funny. I'm actually surprised. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of surprised they put this in the horror category. I don't know if I would really describe this as horror. Like
I
it's a,
know when it
it's
first came out, it was being billed as a horror movie, though I remember when I watched it, I'm where you were. Like after seeing it, I would not consider it horror, but it's been listed as horror, and I know it was billed as a horror movie, so maybe that's why.
because to me it's more like a almost like a survival thriller comedy, if that makes sense.
It's re would you agree with basically saying it's like if Hunger Games was a comedy?
pretty much. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a and it's not like a, like a Will Ferrell comedy. It's like a satire dark comedy with
Yeah, it's like Ready or Not,
survive.
just with less
Right.
murder.
Yes,
Well,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
No, yeah, that's a pretty good comparison. It's like that really sort of dark, morbid humor with a bunch of like action violence, where I guess the horror comes in a little bit with like the thrills and the killing and stuff. But yeah, no, I just thought it was good. I thought the commentary was good. I thought the messaging was good. I thought it was really funny. I thought it was really smartly written. But I really need to rewatch this because it's been so long. But this was like right at that like when COVID hit, because it was one of
Hmm.
like the last movies to come out, I think. And it was like March, like the first week of March in 2020. So like it was in theaters for like a week or two before like the world shut down. So
Yeah, I remember we did not get to go see it because, of course, like you said, the world shut down, and then it was one of those first movies to get put on VOD because they like still wanted to make money back from it. So we were like, "All right, let's do this."
yeah, no, I really liked this one.
I agree. Like you said, this I honestly part of me feels like because of the amount of societal backlash it got, it almost hyped it up more. Where in my personal opinion, at least when the movie first was announced, I feel like it pretty much flew under the radar until everybody started. Almost like I would double down on that Civil War movie that's coming out, where generally speaking, that flew under the radar, and then all of a sudden the first trailer drops. And everybody started talking about it, and it probably put it more at the forefront of people's minds than if it was to just come out and no one had any idea what it was. Um, and so I don't know. I feel like people were just destined to hate it because they had already decided that from everything they read beforehand. But yeah, I liked it. I need to rewatch this as well. I've had this. It's like 8 on my rewatch list as I'm going through stuff, so I'm gonna get there eventually. But I remember really liking it back when it first came out. For people who do like Always Sunny, Dennis is really good in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's got other characters in it, and kind of like you said, I mean, if you're somebody who can kind of appreciate stabs at both sides and have some fun with the satire, then I would say this is the movie for you.
Sure.
Um, okay, so the next one, did you watch Friday the 13th Part 5?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I this is back when I was trying to get through the Friday the 13th movies, and this was one of the ones that helped kill that dream very quickly. Um, yeah, and really not I guess it's so memorable for being just the black sheep of the Friday the 13th franchise, because this is the one where notoriously, like, Jason isn't even in it. The whole thing is like, oh, Jason's come back, but really it's not Jason. Um, yeah, I don't really remember anything about this except all of the characters are unbearably annoying, and the final reveal of the twist makes absolutely no sense. And like who the killer is and his motivation, it's just really dumb and feels like really forced, and I don't believe it for 1 second. And it just feels like Friday the 13th especially is like notorious for being that like B or C list, like, like cheap slasher. Like at least that's what like critics would say of it. And I would defend some of them, but this one specifically was literally directed by a porn director, and it definitely has that sort of like porno feel where it's like it's just girls are just topless and characters are having sex on screen, and just it's just overly gratuitous, and it just feels like a really cheap like porno knockoff. And so, yeah, I mean, I will give it some credit for wanting to try and do something different and subvert expectations. I just don't think the execution worked at all, on top of all the other things. So, this was not one of my favorites of the Friday the 13th that I watched.
It's okay. Totally agree. I think most Friday the 13th fans, as you pointed out, put this as their last one. It is in no offense to Roy Burns, but you can't replace Jason Voorhees. You just can't. And so the if I remember correctly, this is the one where there's that like biker guy who's in the porta potty taking a poop, but he's like making weird noises, and his girlfriend's outside like, "Come on, baby, you can do it!" Like there's like that
Yeah.
weird. 1 minute porta potty scene for no reason.
It's just so trashy and lowbrow.
Yeah, no worries. We don't have to spend too much time on this. We both just don't like this movie. Have you seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2?
I have not, no.
Okay. Then okay, what is this? Oh, Carrie. Okay.
I
Wow.
have not seen either Carries.
I am surprised. So the website that we're using, they rank the movies, and they have their score for Carrie is a 16, which I think is very interesting. Um, I feel like that one's heralded as one of like the best horror. Like I don't necessarily agree with that, but I at least it's a good movie, and so it's interesting to see them rate it that low. Have you seen The Faculty?
I have not.
Ooh,
I
okay.
need
Ooh,
to,
have you?
but I have not.
Yeah, that one's a good one. Have you seen Becky?
I have not. Man,
All
we're
right.
just reaching a stretch of movies I just have not seen. We were doing
So
good
you've
there. We
seen
were
this
doing
one.
good there.
Yeah, you actually, I recommend Becky. I haven't watched the sequel, but the first one's really good. Kevin James does a horror movie, and he's actually not bad. Um, I know you've seen the Belko Experiment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, we personally have watched this together. Um, yeah, no, the Belko Experiment, I love it. It is written by James Gunn, not directed by James Gunn. But just really, really cool premise. Um, love all the actors and performances in it. I know you especially like when movies try and talk about human behavior and psychology. I like that too. This is one of those like what would you do situations. So it's one of those movies that's really fun to put yourself in their shoes. Um, and yeah, just for people that don't know, it's just this office building gets like shut down and like bars go over the windows and a voice on the intercom is like if you don't kill whatever, like it's like it starts off really small, like it's like, oh, if you don't kill like one person in the next 10 minutes, we're gonna kill two people. And then it just goes from like if you don't kill like 60 people in the next 30 minutes, we're gonna kill like 100 people. It just keeps getting crazier and crazier. So it's like, is it morally all right to kill people to save other people's lives? Like it's just like a yeah, it's one of those great what would you do movies, a really great like survival horror movie, definitely very gory. Really good performances, and it's like because it's written by James Gunn, it's like darkly funny at points in like a not like an outright comedic way, but in just like a absurd, like just absurd what's going on, like all the ultra violence way. It's got some cool twists, and I always thought the ending kind of warranted maybe more, but I don't think anything's happening on that front. But it does leave on a very intriguing, mysterious note.
It is. I know that John C. McGinley has been in a lot of stuff, but I feel like this is one of my more likable roles with him. Same with Tony Goldwyn. He's really good in this as well. I had to be reminded that Michael Rooker is in this. I forgot about that. This is let's see here. David Dastmalchian, Sean Gunn. So yeah, there's a lot of Gunn staples in this movie. But no, you probably remember I pretty famously hated this movie the first time I watched it with you, and then the second time I watched it, absolutely fell in love with it. Which I think is just proof that your mood when you watch a movie can really decide whether you like it or not. Because I have no idea why I didn't like it the first time, but yeah, no, this one's really solid. You hit the nail on the head when you said it earlier. If there's a movie if there's like a random subgenre that's my favorite, it's movies like this where there's like the horror aesthetic, but it's totally doing a philosophical experiment that plays with the psychology of humans, then I'm like all on board. So yeah, this one's very good. Uh it's going to be interesting to see where this one gets ranked because this is another one I really need to rewatch. I have it on my list, but yeah, no,
Very
this one.
anxiety inducing. Like it's just like the adrenaline's pumping and you just feel just like anxious.
Yeah, and I now that I actually work in the corporate world, I probably would have a greater appreciation for this movie because, like what you were saying with the "What would you do," it's one thing when you're a college student and you're like, "Oh, what would you do?" But when you actually like work in cubicles next to people and you're like, what if all of a sudden we were locked in here and we had to?" I don't know, but like I feel like there's a different level when you've experienced it.
100%.
Okay, have you seen Ma?
I have seen Ma.
Okay.
So I'm a huge Blumhouse fan. I try and see as much Blumhouse stuff whenever it comes out, even if it doesn't look that good. Um, I saw Ma. I've rewatched it like once or twice since seeing it in theaters. I think it's fine. I think it's in that sense a little underrated because most people were dragging it as like one of the worst Blumhouse, one of the worst examples of Blumhouse movies, blah blah blah. But like I thought it was fine. It's more of like a psychological thriller than it is a horror, straight up horror, even if it's got horror elements. Um, Obviously Octavia Spencer's great. She plays this great sort of like twisted lady person that's like psycho and it's got these kids and yeah, I mean everything's fine. I just remember that's just the key word. I just remember this movie being fine. Nothing like standout, but nothing like particularly bad either. But in retrospect, I feel like I wouldn't like it if I rewatched it now.
Yeah, this one's interesting. So as you know, I'm a huge Luke Evans person, which is why I originally watched this in the first place. However, I think I would have to. I don't know. I don't want to be too harsh because I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember really not liking it, and I think part of it is because the trailers looked so good to me that I set the bar too high, and then when I watched it, it just felt underwhelming. So I would agree with you that it's just fine, even if my word might be underwhelming. But yeah, this one, I really like Octavia Spencer. I think she's a great actress, and I don't know the like I haven't rewatched the movie. I haven't felt the need to. I don't know if I ever would. So that's where I am on this one. This one is I'll just say underwhelmingly fine.
I feel like they had like a really good idea, but then they just went about it in like probably like the least interesting way possible.
Yeah, that's actually I would agree with that because I like I said I remember being enamored with the trailer and thinking that the plot sounded awesome and then just bad execution. So I agree with your assessment. Have you seen Piggy?
No, I'm not familiar with that at all.
Okay, I know you haven't seen Mr. Harrigan's Phone. Ooh, you have seen The Invitation. And for the record, this one was given a 92. I know you like that movie, so I figured you'd enjoy
The
them
one
giving it that high of a rating.
the one with Logan Marshall Green, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. No, I absolutely adore this movie. This is one of those, like, one of my go-to horror recommendations, especially if I know the person maybe doesn't like horror or they're more on the arts, as I say, artsy fartsy side of movies. This is definitely one for them then, because I'm not particularly a big fan of like the whole like elevated horror thing, but this is easily, in my opinion, the best elevated horror. It's really slow burn, so you got to stick with it, but it comes to a very, very gut-wrenchingly satisfying conclusion. And it all just builds up. It's just great character stuff. It's basically a bottle story. Logan Marshall Green is starring. I've said many times on this podcast, he's a very underrated actor, and he rarely, if ever, is a starring man or a leading man, and he is the star of this one, so he gets to lead. But yeah, it starts off very innocent, like it's just going to be a standard drama, and it just gets slowly creepier and creepier and creepier, and then it just escalates into basically full on horror by the end. So definitely recommend this one, and like no one knows about it. Like even in film circles that I'm in, like haven't even heard of this movie. So more people need to watch The Invitation.
Which is interesting that you say that because I feel like didn't it get put on the front of Netflix for a while? I feel like that's how I found it.
That was really must have been really recent. It actually was on Net. I first found it on Netflix a long time ago. It
Yeah,
was
I
one of those
found it in
things
like
when it was on Netflix.
2017 or whenever it came out.
Yeah, they like put it on Netflix, they took it off, and then they put it back on relatively recently, I'd guess.
Okay.
Um,
No, I was thinking back when it first came on, so that though. So my apologies on that one. Yeah, no, I really like this movie. Same as you. I'm not a big elevated horror person, but this one is pretty good. Like you said, it's a slow burn, so you got to get through it. But once you get to the ending, talk about a philosophical quandary. I know we're not spoiling
mhm.
it, so I won't go too in depth. But yeah, no, this one's pretty solid. And like you said, it's just another reason why Logan Marshall Green should be in more movies.
For sure.
Um, have you seen In the Tall Grass?
I have not.
Okay. 47 meters down.
Oh, yes. We
I
don't
know
even
you've seen
need
this
any
one.
more. This is number one. No. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this before. I love shark movies. I love anything to do with the water because that absolutely terrifies me. I'm hugely thalassophobic. So, and I watch horror movies to get scared, of course. So I love movies that will exacerbate that and give me as much anxiety as possible because I'm a maniac who hates myself. And yeah, this is one of those movies where I think it has a really great premise. I think it's executed really well. It's got two great actresses and is surprisingly entertaining and keeps the pace for a movie that's basically an hour and a half of two girls stuck in a little teeny like 8 by 8 foot cage at the bottom of the ocean. Like you'd think that would like drag on or get like old, but it really kind of keeps its pace throughout and keeps you like constantly like on the edge of your toes and just whew, yeah, some of the moments just are absolutely horrifying and probably the most terrifying. Like out of all the horror films, this I would say is probably for me the scariest film that I've ever watched.
Interesting. Actually, I would believe that. Yeah, that's
Especially when you're
completely fair.
me and you're afraid of sharks in water. Like when I saw this in
Exactly.
theaters for the first time, it was a really small, like physically the theater itself was small. Like there was maybe like 20 or 30 chairs, and it was just me and my girlfriend at the time. And I think we were like the only ones in there. So it was just really dark, really small space. There weren't like other people I could really look at in front of me. And I literally almost like exited the theater because I was like, I couldn't breathe. Like the anxiety was just too real. So it did its job.
Yeah, there you go. That's good filmmaking right there. Um, this is another one that I watched with you our freshman year. It's it probably deserves a rewatch on my end because I remember thinking it was good. I don't remember liking it as much as you. I'll just say like a 7 or 8 out of 10. Like, it's like kind of like good medium. The one thing that I do remember and I will never forget is the famous scene where she's swimming and the light turns on and there's some stuff. Um, that scene, kind of similar with that Saw scene I mentioned earlier, is like one of my most memorable scenes from a horror movie. So like that's awesome. Um, I have not seen the sequel. Didn't you say they're making a third one, or you're just really clamoring for a third one?
The first of all, the sequel is also really good. Not as good as the first one. Um, there was a third one that was said to be in development, but I haven't heard anything about it since the second one came out in 2019. And the director, Johannes Roberts, is actually directing another shark movie called like The Red Triangle, I think it's called. That's supposed to come out either later this year or next year. So I don't know if this like took the place of that or if it is in a way like a 47 meters down three, just not a proper sequel, but it's like another shark movie that he's doing. So I don't know, but I would like a third one based on a similar premise of being like stuck in an underwater location.
As you know, my perfect pitch for a shark movie would be underwater like treasure hunters who have gone to a crashed ship or sub or something from like World War II or another war or whatever. And while they're in there, they end up getting trapped inside with sharks. That's my like perfect shark movie.
That'd be a perfect third one, honestly.
There's my pitch. I know this isn't a pitch episode, but there's my pitch.
We're
Um,
gonna start running out of ways in which people can be constrained in small spaces underwater.
That's the we just got we're eventually going to get to sharks in space.
So of course, moon sharks.
Why has sci-fi not done moon sharks? That feels like a missed opportunity. Um I know this is random, but there's a sci-fi movie called Ghost Shark, and it can go in any place where there is water, and it literally attacks a woman in a bucket of water, and it attacks people in baths. It's a sci-fi movie, so it's not scary, but also like imagine if a shark could be in your bathtub.
I do not want to imagine that.
Um, Ironically, the next one that we were randomized to was Deep Blue Sea. Have you seen that one?
I have, but also not one. I guess it is a horror movie because it's like that creature feature, but like
Hmm.
it's more of like a I feel like a sci-fi adventure sci-fi action comedy almost.
All I know is this is the movie that teaches you that you should never give a speech about being able to survive the horror movie, otherwise you'll die.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's cheesy. It's like a cheesy fun time, something you'd put on just to like have fun with. It's not like trying to be something super serious. It's like a Rennie Harlan movie. So it's like got the iconic lines, it's got the iconic moments. It does have some very terrifying moments, but like it kind of like uses CGI, like really crappy 90s CGI. And so that kind of takes me out of it and doesn't make me as scared of it as say like 47 meters down did. But like it's fine, it's an enjoyable shark thriller. Thomas Jane's always a good time. LL Cool J is very funny in it. So yeah, it's not one of my favorite shark movies, which is like unpopular because most people would probably list that as their favorite shark movie, but I'm just more into shark movies than I guess the average person.
This is not my favorite shark movie. However, I think I like this movie a little more than you do. And that's probably just because this is my catchphrase at this point. There's good movies and there's fun movies. This is not a good movie, but it's a fun movie. And the fact that there's literally a whole scene where LL Cool J fights a shark is just epic. um, as you can probably tell from other stuff we've talked about on the pod, uh, I really enjoy movies that are like so crazy that they know they're crazy that they just kind of have fun with it, and that makes it more fun for me. And I tend to enjoy the just like fun, relax movie kind of thing. So yeah, everything you said. Uh, Back when Samuel Jackson was doing horror, and yeah, if you ever wanted to watch Chef LL Cool J, he is a chef in this movie, fight a shark. This is the movie for you. Um, have
I
you
think the sequel,
seen?
I've
Oh,
heard the
sorry.
third one's not bad. I've heard the second one's trash, but I've heard the third one's actually not that bad.
So you know how Walmart does those like, oh no, sorry, this was Dollar Tree or store or whatever. You know how they do like the dollar movie bins?
Yeah.
Um, I got this one that was called like Shark Night or something, not the movie, and it has the Deep Blue Sea trilogy, and I think it's called Open Water, and it's the Open Water trilogy, and it's all on one
Ooh.
DVD. But I haven't watched any of them except for Deep Blue Sea.
I'm a big fan of the Open Water trilogy.
What? This is gonna sound really bad. If they're in open water, how is there a movie? Like, is it just an hour and a half of them treading water?
In the yeah, and basically, yeah. The
Okay.
second one isn't actually a shark movie. So I like all three of them for very different reasons. And because they're all three very different films. Like the first one isn't really a shark movie. The second one's not a shark movie. Really only the third one is where they actually go like we're gonna CGI some great white sharks and like they're gonna be attacking them. The first two really aren't. Like in the first one there's like reef sharks because it's very like quote unquote like real. I mean it's based on a true story, but it tries to keep it as like grounded and realistic as possible. The second one doesn't have to do with sharks at all, but the third one is where it's the most sharky.
Okay. It's definitely I f- I feel like those movies would actually like scare me because while I don't necessarily have the like going in water aspect that you do, if I feel like anybody would be scared being out in the middle of nowhere just treading water, no idea what's below you to the left or to the right, and essentially no chance of survival. Like that would suck. So I actually not. I kind of not. I think you may have talked me into watching this.
So just real quick, the second one is based on a short story, and it's basically imagine you're out on a boat with your friends, and you all jump into the water, but the last guy to jump off forgets to put the ladder down, and
Oh.
it's like a yacht, so it's like the draft is like 10 or 12 feet, so they're literally next to the boat, but they can't get on the boat,
Ooh.
and it's really cool. It's really intense. Not so out of the three, both sequels were originally different movies that they just like released as an open water sequel. So like Open Water 2 is called Open Water 2 Adrift. And it was originally a movie just called Adrift. And then they made it Open Water 2. And then Open Water 3 is called Cage Dive. And it was originally an Australian horror movie called Cage Dive that they just released as Open Water 3 Cage Dive. So neither of the sequels were intended to actually be a part of that franchise.
Okay, I can respect it. I have no problem with that. That's cool. I like it. It's kind of like
Yeah,
what I guess the collector was supposed to be. Just it's it's like the unofficial Saw spinoff. Um,
exactly.
the next one is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Okay. I was a huge fan of these books, 3 volumes. Even to this day, they're literally still on my shelf. Just remember having such good memories reading them as a kid, and the artwork, of course, is what most people remember. And this was a very solid adaptation. It wasn't like great, but it was definitely better than fine. It was a very solid adaptation. It's one of those like intro horror movies, I feel like, or it's a PG-13 horror movie that definitely has some really creepy, imagery and effects and, monsters, ghouls, what have you. Um, but it's what I feel like it's like if you have a kid you're trying to get into horror, but you don't want to show them something totally R-rated, it's a good one. If you have someone who doesn't like horror, but still might want to check it out. I think this is a good, like maybe it might be one of my recommendations for like an entry film. Um, but yeah, no, it's good. It still kind of keeps that sort of like like not childish, but keeps that sort of lighthearted-ish juvenile tone while still carrying over a lot of the really creepy imagery. And so I really liked that. And it's from Andre Orvdahl, who directed The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and Guillermo del Toro produced it. So it's got some good creative talent behind the scenes.
Yeah, ditto on what you said. This is my most checked out library book. Every week when we would go, I would just return this and then check it out again. I absolutely loved this book as a kid. I do finally own it now, of course. Um, I remember being super excited for the movie, and so there's a chance I set the bar too high, and that's why I was a little underwhelmed. I agree with you. I don't think it was bad. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting. There are parts of me that think that maybe it's because like this was off the heel of like Stranger Things and It, where it felt like a lot of the horror movies were doing kids riding around on their bikes and like investigating stuff. So there's a chance that maybe there was like a fatigue factor. Not sure. Um, I Yeah, I don't know. I haven't rewatched this. I probably should. I remember leaving the theater just kind of being like, that was okay. I know they planned for sequels, so like if they happen, cool. But I remember not like clamoring for a sequel. I don't know. This is when I would say kind of like earlier, where maybe I'd give it like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, where it was like medium good, if that makes sense. I will say the Scarecrow story, the Spider story, and the Big Lady story were my three like scariest when I was a kid. So I was glad they adapted all of those. Um, I would argue your thing with uh uh the water would be mine with the idea of 1,000 spiders crawling all over my body at the same time. I might just curl into the fetal position and die. So that one definitely gets me. And then for some reason, the drawing of the woman just always freaked me out. And then my personal favorite was the I want to wash your windows, and then the
Yes, the Viper.
yes, that was the Viper was my personal favorite, and then the Scarecrow. I like the idea of that story. I feel like that story in and of itself could have been its own movie, but yeah, that was that's isn't that the most famous one from the book? Is that probably would you feel like that's pretty fair to say?
The Herald one, the
Yeah.
Scarecrow,
Hmm.
probably the most iconic. Yeah, when this one came out in 2019, immediately announced a sequel, and then it's been like 4.5 years since that it got released, and I haven't heard anything. So all those kids are like 25 now. So
There
I
you
don't
go,
know
new
if that's
kids.
happening. Yeah. I just remember like this isn't really a fault of the movie on its own, like by nature of like being a movie, it has to like sacrifice some of the source material. But I just remember being like, oh, they didn't have that one story, or oh, they didn't reference that one story, or like, oh, they referenced that one story, but it was only in it for like 5 minutes. And so like I just kind of like naturally started like playing favorites with that.
That I actually so if do you remember the Cabinet of Curiosities that Guillermo did on Netflix?
That was a good show.
I personally feel like, not that I'm mad they did a movie, but I feel like this would have been better as a Cabinet of Curiosities esque style TV show where it was like 16 episodes and each episode was adapting one of the famous short stories. Like, I don't know. That's just, I feel like that would have worked better than the way they tried to merge it together for the movie with them all being connected. Just personal preference.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think any one of these individually could have definitely been like an episode or even in some cases a movie on their own. So,
The next one is one of your favorites, A Nightmare on Elm Street.
which one?
The first one.
Yeah, so we've talked about Nightmare on Elm Street. We've done pitches for what we would do with the franchise. I really like this original one. It is my potentially favorite in the franchise. I have actually seen all the Nightmare movies, unlike Friday the 13th. I did watch through all the Nightmare movies. Our hot take is always we like the 2010 reboot. And honestly, that's kind of neck and neck with this one. But, just for respect factor, I might just at least say that this one would be my favorite of the franchise. But yeah, no, I mean, I like it. Great premise. Robert Englund's iconic. It still feels genuinely scary even today. I think a lot of it still holds up. Like the horror elements still hold up. The whole idea of like it's literally the one place you can't escape, like sleep in your dreams. Um, I just find that very effective. Really sort of put Wes Craven on the map. Like I said, just super iconic from like the Freddy imagery to some of the lines to the intro of Johnny Depp, things like that. Yeah, I would say it is definitely my second favorite classic horror franchises. As I think I've mentioned, like Halloween is my number one, Michael Myers is my number one, but I would put Freddy and Nightmare over Jason and Friday the 13th. So it's like right in the middle for my
I
80s slashers. But yeah.
I forgot that after you watched the Halloween franchise, it ended up overtaking Freddy.
Yeah, for a while this was because I didn't watch most of my horror watching historically had been like modern horror of like the 2000s and 2010s. So I haven't, to this day, I still haven't seen a lot of the big horror franchises. So Nightmare was the first big classic franchise I watched all the way through. Um, so for a while, I said that that was my favorite, but I've since watched Halloween all the way through and attempted to watch Friday the 13th all the way through. And I will also be remedying some other franchises hopefully later this year in spooky season. But Nightmare still is up there, but it is no longer my favorite.
It is interesting because as you know, Jason will probably forever be my favorite slasher villain. But I also, if I was to have to pick to watch a full franchise, would probably pick the Halloween franchise just because I feel like a lot of its sequels were handled much better than a lot of the Friday sequels. So yeah, it actually is kind of interesting where I would like that goes back and forth. Also, um, so faithful listeners, you can thank me, by the way, for making my co-host here watch classic movies, or classic horror movies. But the when I show people the classics, like I've shown them Hellraiser, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Nightmare on Elm Street, they like always hate them, and it's so interesting to me because like we've talked about it, I can understand if you're somebody that's around our age and you've just been spoiled by the modern technology and you're just used to seeing certain things, but I feel like there's also even more than just a respect factor. Like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they are actually good movies with a lot of great cinematography, with great writing, with great directing. You can argue the acting, that's going to be a thing with all slasher movies, but like I don't know, it's so interesting to me. I feel like when I show people classic movies and they're like, "Oh, this was made in the 80s or 70s or whatever it is, they just automatically write it off. I don't know. That's just something that I've noticed when I've tried to show people classic slashers. I don't know. Take that as you will. But to talk on Nightmare on Elm Street, I know I'm a blasphemer, but I personally like the 2010 one the best. That after rewatching it, I think I confirmed that I was in the middle, kind of like you were, but I think I give the modern one just a slight edge over the classic. Though I agree, there's a lot of really good things with the first movie. And it's like a 1A and a 1B. I promise I'm not putting the remake like so high above. I feel like Nightmare on Elm Street is one. I would actually make the argument that it has more bad sequels than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I think also may make me a blasphemer. But I feel like 1 and 3 are good, and then you can argue 2, and then the ones past 3 just shouldn't exist. But the that first one is really solid. Of course, Robert Englund's great, and a lot of good one-liners, good special effects. So yeah, that first one's a solid movie. Did you say something?
Said I agree.
Okay. The next one is It, the 2017 one, not the Tim Curry one.
Well, good because I haven't seen the Tim Curry one. Um, I haven't watched this in a long time. I saw it in theaters and then I watched it again before It Chapter 2. Um, yeah, I mean, it's classic, it's iconic. I never really particularly got into Stranger Things, but like you said, this was like that time when like the whole kids riding on their bikes facing some sort of horror threat was like at their peak. So I liked the interactions with the kids. I thought all the castings were great, especially for kid actors, because they didn't pick 27-year-olds and make them pretend to be teenagers. They picked like actual like 14-year-olds to play themselves. So that's always a good sign. Of course, Bill Skarsgård is great as Pennywise. He's just born to play these like really weirdo, like just psycho weird characters, and he just absolutely loses it as Pennywise, and that's always fun to see. Um, but two things that I think just Andy Muschietti, who directed this movie and the sequel, I think he's only directed a handful of movies. Like he came off of Mama before this, and then now there's this one, and he did It Chapter 2, and he did The Flash. I think so. It's hard to base it off, just a couple movies, but it seems like two things about his directing style that I don't like that are really on display here is like incorporating really, really dumb humor in like places it shouldn't be, which is like a particular pet peeve of mine. Like this was like funny in like a not a dark comedy way, just like a really goofy sort of like lowbrow humor way, just like injected in there, kind of breaking any sort of like tension or horror oftentimes. So there's that. And then he just like really overuses CGI. And I think the sequel is a worse offender of both of these, but they're both present in this one where it's like so much of it is just CGI and it's not even particularly good CGI. And there's just a lot of it when it feels like it could be practical. So, yeah, I mean, it's still really great. It's like it might be the highest grossing horror movie of all time. It's
I'm
definitely up
pretty
there
sure it still is, yeah.
and one of the highest rated, I feel like, horror movies of all time. So, yeah, I like it, but I liked it a lot more when I saw it for the first time. I think in retrospect, it doesn't hold up as much.
Yeah, we actually I think we touched on this in an earlier podcast about how of the main genres, horror is like the ugly stepchild, because of its taboo nature. Even in horror's heyday, I don't know if any of the movies really reached the level of It. You could maybe make an argument like Exorcist or The Thing, but I think at least as far as outside of horror circles, society, like even non-horror people just fell in love with It. So it is kind of interesting. The I pretty much I remember seeing this opening weekend. I went to go see it with some friends. It was in a packed theater, so like the viewing experience was cool. Similar to kind of the stuff you said, I'm not a paranormal person. I didn't really like the kids' perspective aspect, and I know that's a big thing in the book, so like they have to do it. I don't know. For me, similar like what you said with Stranger Things or scary stories tell in the dark, it's it's at least kind of it's just not my favorite thing to see movies from the perspective of the children. I don't know. For me, like yes, especially in It, they play with a lot of interesting themes that I think make the characters cool. Or at least well developed is probably a better word to say. It's not my favorite, and while Skarsgård is awesome, Pennywise never really scared me. And like you said, it falls into a lot of the main tropes that you will find in paranormal movies. So I don't know. It never really was my thing. I did not go see It 2 in theaters. I think I saw it like a year after it even hit HBO. I just wasn't really that excited to see It 2.
There was a lot of hype, and I feel like I just haven't really gotten the urge to rewatch it, or like this duology or whatever.
Yeah, I would, and I know there like the ending of the book has like a space turtle or something. So I remember there was this huge meme before It Chapter 2 came out where it's like, will they do the space tortoise or whatever it is? And then if I remember correctly, they don't do it. But they were like,
Mhm.
will they be true to the book and do the space tortoise? Because to Tim Curry's, I know they don't do it. Um, uh, have you seen Ouija?
I have not. I've seen Ouija Origin of Evil.
Okay.
The
Um,
Yeah.
I know you've seen Halloween H2O.
Yeah, but I don't know between that and Friday the 13th Part 5. I don't. Oh, never mind. I was thinking
I was about to say
Resurrections. Okay.
H2O. Come
Yes.
on,
No,
man.
sorry. No. I was confused. Yes. Halloween H20. I've only seen this movie one time. It was when I was watching through all the Halloween movies before Halloween ends in 2022. So that it's been about a year and a half. Um, I remember liking it, putting it in my top half of Halloween movies, but it was in like ultimately like the upper middle of my Halloween ranking. So a lot of people seem to put this like top three, top five, sometimes even top three movies. Some people even put it at number two, just behind the original. And I think out of like the 13 movies, I had it at like number like six or seven. So like it wasn't in my top five, wasn't up there, it's just barely in the upper half. I liked it. I just didn't think it was just nearly as good as some of the ones above it. Um, it, yeah, I don't know. It felt sort of, I don't know if tame is the right word. It just felt tonally kinda off to me. It didn't feel like the tone really matched a Halloween movie, because it felt very much like, I know this was very much influenced by Scream, and I think that really shows, because it has this tone that's a little bit different. Not that it's, like, satirical like Scream, but it has a little bit more of that, like, stereotypical teen slasher element that like really the Halloween franchise never really had, despite even the original being sort of like a teen slasher. I don't know if any of this is making sense, but that was just what I remember. It just felt very different. And so it's felt a little reserved and a little subdued, and that's why it didn't leave as much of like an impression. Um, I'm a huge fan of Halloween 2018 and where Laurie is taken in that story, and so I just wasn't very compelled by where they decided to take Laurie in this situation, in this other continuity of like where she ended up after the trauma of what happened. Um, so it was like the first attempt at like a legacy sequel, but yeah, I mean, I liked it, but just not nearly as much as some of the other ones or how other people like it.
Okay, that's fair. I'm gonna do a plug real quick. If anybody's curious to learn about this movie, there is an entire Halloween playlist on the channel where I break down the behind the scenes of the movie. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Um, it is interesting because, like you were talking about with the Scream inspiration. So behind the scenes, the fifth movie came out at 89. Then it took a 6 year gap, which was unheard of for the Halloween franchise because every movie was just being like put out year after year. And then we get the sixth movie in 95, and then this one came in 98. And there was a lot of change behind the scenes. Mustafa Akkad and his son were exchanging hands. The son was largely responsible for Curse of Michael Myers, which, as you probably know, and I feel like most people would agree is like the worst one. And so they needed a fresh lens, and the pitch was supposed to be that H2O would bring it back to that original movie's feel. And then of course they were like, "Oh, well Scream did really good, so let's also, get some of that in there." And they were like just trying to make a hit, and they did succeed. It did really well, but I totally understand what you're saying. For me personally, this is a franchise that has a bunch of different timelines. So it's been retconned a bunch of times, and you can pick the storyline you prefer. And me personally, I am a 1, 2, 7, 8 guy. The new trilogy did not change my mind on that. I will still be a 1, 2, 7, 8 guy until more Halloween movies come out that inevitably create more storylines. But yeah, no, I really like this movie. Um, Another one, ironically, that features LL Cool J in a horror movie. Um, but yeah, I know a lot of people have complaints that this is the Michael Myers with eyes. But the more that I watch this, the more I'm actually okay with it. I don't know. It's one of those like aspects that I feel like they were just trying to, I don't know. Do something fresh with the character might be a good way to put it. I don't know. You know the scene I'm talking about where he's walking down the hill and she's like, "Oh, well, I've been seeing Michael all over the place. When I blink, he's gone." And then she keeps blinking and he doesn't leave, and then he realizes, "Oh shit," or then she realizes, "Oh shit, Michael's actually here." And then she closes the door and they stare at each other through that window. I don't know. Everybody laughs at that scene, but like for me, I feel like it's actually pretty powerful. So that's just like an example. Of course, Josh Hartnett's great. There's a lot of other actors that would go on to be relatively famous that get murdered in this movie. So yeah, I just think it's fun. And as you know, we disagree completely. I'm actually a fan of Halloween Resurrection. I'm pretty sure that you are not.
Yes, that was my, I think, last Halloween movie, like, ranked. It was either that or Halloween Curse of Michael Myers, one or the other.
Nah,
I think
Curse of Michael
Resurrections was
Myers
last.
has to be less. There's no way you put Curse of Michael Myers above Resurrection.
I think I did, actually.
Resurrection at
Um,
least has an actual story. Curse of Michael Myers didn't know it. They literally had three different people write the scripts and then decide to put them all together. That's why it feels like it's three different stories.
that's true. These are
Eh.
facts. Yeah, and for the record, I make my own timeline. I am a 1, 2. We'll just pretend that Lori never finds out that they were ever related, and in my head, I will believe that they're related. Halloween 2018, and then the last 10, 15 minutes of Halloween ends.
Oh wait, you skip Halloween Kills?
Yeah, I would put my ideal timeline is you keep two. You just, like I said, just pretend you can pretend that they're siblings and just no one ever finds out. And then, because I like most of two, and then you 2018, and then you put the very last of Halloween ends and make it seem like that happened that night.
So I found this thing that some guy online made called the Halloween like murder cut or something, and it's Halloween 2018, then all of the murder sequences from Halloween Kills, because of course they're the best part. The story's pretty trash, and then the end of Halloween ends after we deal with the whole origin of the character that nobody came to see, and it was actually pretty solid. I like the murder cut.
Yeah, I could probably just put Halloween Kills in there too. I wouldn't be opposed to it. It's not that it would take anything away. I just don't think it would add anything for me personally.
Oh, that's perfectly fair. I think that's the one that's the fun movie. It's not a good movie. It's just they turned Michael Myers into Jason Voorhees, and I think people had been waiting for that for a while. So I think it's more fun. The themes they play with in the story, in my personal opinion, fall completely flat. Though I get what they were going for. So like, you can remove all the stuff that's not murder,
Mhm,
except you have to keep
exactly.
Big John and Little John. They're canon.
Right, of course.
Um, to hit a
Is this the
perfect
last one?
Yep, to hit a perfect 15, we're finishing with Dead Silence. You've seen that one, right?
I actually just watched this for the first time, like, only a couple months ago.
Okay, perfect. So that's what we're finishing with.
Um, Not a huge fan. I This is it's kind of a weird movie, and I don't mean just like in terms of like it being like a horror movie or whatnot. It just didn't do it for me. For a while, I was told that this is like the black sheep of James Wan's filmography, and like some people were really hyping it up, like, oh, this is like the forgotten James Wan movie. Like this is really good. Like no one ever talks about it, but this is really good. And I watched it and I was kind of just like really underwhelmed and let down. Yeah, like I said, the tone is like really weird. It's like weirdly funny and not like in a dark comedy sort of way, in just like a goofy sort of way sometimes, but then sometimes it'll play it like totally serious, like straightforward, gritty horror movie, and then it'll just go to like some like really goofy, lightheartedness that just doesn't really mesh together. And I just didn't find it particularly scary. Like even, it's playing on the whole ventriloquist dummy thing, but I don't even think it really like capitalizes on that as much, except like in the finale, I guess. But like throughout the movie, it's more like a mystery, I would say, than like a horror movie, because I didn't remember it being like really particularly scary. And I also just remember the lore being like really convoluted. The whole like, oh, what's actually going on here just felt like very forced. So I was not a huge fan of this movie. I haven't seen all of James Wan's movies, but this would probably be in the bottom half for sure.
It's interesting because I need to rewatch this movie. I haven't seen it since I was like 13, but when I did watch it, it was one of the scariest movies I had ever seen. It creeped the crap out of me, so that's why I guess I need to rewatch it because I remember really being scared by it. Though it wouldn't be the first time I rewatched a movie that scared me when I was younger that I was no longer scared of now. So take that as you will. Going off of 13-year-old Jacob, like I said, I remember really liking the movie. I remember putting it pretty high up there as far as like the scary horror stuff goes. But yeah, I haven't seen it since I was 13. So I don't know if I'm the best to comment, but yeah, that's it. It's interesting that that was your take on it. I guess I really need to give this one a rewatch.
Had a good atmosphere, I would give it that. And it kind of was just like, I call it jump scare porn, where it does have like quote unquote scares, but like most of the scares are like that thing where it's like a character is looking at something scary intensely, and then it's like something jump scares him, but it's just like a cat or a person standing, his friend standing behind him. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's just like that. So it doesn't actually have anything that I would consider really like scary, but it has a lot of those like, and I think James Wan is particularly kind of bad at that, where he kind of like crams in a lot of those kinds of jump scares.
Yeah, like the famous one in Insidious where they go to Patrick Wilson and the red guy's face is behind him.
That one's good. I'll give him that. But I'll give him that. That's like the one time I think it's worked. Other than that, in this movie, I just remember it was just a bunch of jump scares for things that didn't end up actually being scary.
Okay.
And I just don't like that in a horror movie.
I am going to assume then that it's just because I don't like dolls. They creep me out. My grandmother, when I was a child, gifted me a doll that had these eyes that followed you while you moved. Whoever thought
Terrifying.
whoever thought that that was a good gift for a child has never had children. And ever since then, I've hated. Like even as a kid, the original Chucky movie did actually scare me when I was a kid. It doesn't at all now. But like anything that had to do with dolls, like Annabelle creeped me out, stuff like that. Um,
Fair.
so we now have 15. Do you want me to go first while you take your time ranking your stuff?
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. So, ironically, last week, I feel like we pulled a lot of movies that I didn't really like, which made it kind of hard to rank because I had to put movies I didn't really want to rewatch in like the top 5 and stuff. Whereas this week, we managed to pull a lot of movies I really do like, and I guess that happens when we pick horror. Um, so I would just like to say from staring at this, my top 11 are movies that I would feel pretty confident rewatching tonight if I had the chance. Like I think we did a much better job this time of pulling movies that I would that I enjoy. Um, so I guess I'll just start at the bottom. Number 15, I put Poltergeist. I wanted really badly to put Roy Burns at the bottom. However, I dislike paranormal movies more than I dislike Roy Burns, and I feel like if I was to watch a horror movie tonight, I would rather watch Roy Burns than Poltergeist. That's really what it boiled down to. So 14, I have Friday the 13th, part 5. Um, 13, I put Ma. This is another one, we kind of touched on it. It was just underwhelmingly fine. 12, I have It. Like I said, I did not really get into the hype. I have not rewatched this since 2017, and I don't really want to. But then we start getting into the ones that I feel like I actually enjoy as movies. So 11, I have The Thing, the one from 2011. Um, this is one I need to rewatch. That's why I don't have it higher. Nostalgia made me want to put it higher, but I feel like that would be disingenuous to the ones that I put higher. At number 10, I have Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Kind of the same. It's more recent, so I feel like my feelings would be more valid. But another one that I need to rewatch, I kind of remember it being, once again, underwhelmingly good, but worth putting above The Thing, just purely because I haven't rewatched it. At number 9, I have 47 Meters Down. I really like this movie. If it sounded like I didn't earlier, I would say I at least like the movie. I think I said I would give it like a 7 or something earlier. I probably need to rewatch this, but I have it at 9. At 8, I have The Invitation. If you are watching this podcast before last week's, the way I'm ranking these is that I'm trying to decide if I was to watch a movie right after this podcast and just chill for the night, which one would I pick? And so, since The Invitation is such a slow burn, I feel like you kind of have to be in the mood for it, at least me personally. So while I think this is objectively speaking a better movie than some of the stuff I have higher up, I would not be as likely to pick it to watch for funsies, so to speak. 7, I have Dead Silence, totally going off of nostalgia. Like I said, I haven't watched this since I was like 13, so take that one as you will, but I remember it being pretty scary, so I feel like I would be more interested to rewatch it now that I've heard that it maybe doesn't hold up later on. At 6, I have The Hunt. Another one I need to rewatch, but I really remember liking this. I remember it being fun, and I feel like it would be a good movie to watch tonight. Then moving into my top 5, I have the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Uh, Kind of just the same that we were talking about before. I feel like me potentially more than the average person. I have a huge respect for the classic horror movies. So while I might have this higher than somebody else might, it's purely just because I enjoy them. I've seen them all a million times. That's like my thing. So I would definitely be more willing to watch this. At 4, I have Deep Blue Sea. Like I said earlier, very fun movie. I don't think I've rewatched this one in a couple years, so it might be fun to rewatch. But I like Thomas Jane. I like LL Cool J. I like Samuel L. Jackson. There's some other good actors in it. And who doesn't want to have fun with sharks? At 3, I have Halloween H2O. I really wanted to put this higher. However, when it really came down to it, I think I would be more willing to watch the other two movies. When it comes to Halloween, I really, really like the first and second movie. I tend to lean towards those, so I'm kind of biased towards H2O on this list because I feel like if I was to pick to watch a Halloween movie tonight, it would be other movies in the franchise than H2O. For 2, I have the Belko Experiment. This was really, really tough because from my memory of when I last watched this, I wanted to put it first, but I haven't rewatched it in like 5 years at this point. So I did not feel right putting it at number 1, but if I like going off of memory, this is like the honorable number 1, the tentative number 1, so to speak. But at number 1, I put Hellraiser. I just rewatched this like 2 months ago. I absolutely love this movie. Like I said, I may be in the minority, which is fine. But this one, especially when paired with the second one, is a wonderful viewing. And if we were to get off right now, I feel like either Hellraiser or Belko Experiment would be the ones that I would pick pretty confidently. So that's my very solid 1 and 2.
I think we actually have a great deal of variance on this, which is good. Okay. So my number 15 is Friday the 13th, part 5.
Hmm.
My number 14 is Dead Silence.
Hmm.
My number 13 is Ma.
That's the same.
My number 12 is Poltergeist.
Mm-hmm.
My number 11 is Hellraiser.
Okay.
My number 10 is Deep Blue Sea.
Okay.
My number 9 is Halloween H20. My number 8 is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
My number 7 is It. My number 6 is The Thing 2011. My number 5 is The Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
My number 4 is A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay.
My number 3 is The Belko Experiment. My number 2 is The Invitation. And then my number 1 is 47 Meters Down.
So what's interesting is Nightmare on Elm Street, The Hunt, and Belko Experiment are both in our, we'll say, top six, because I know I have The Hunt at six. So at least we have those relatively the same. I definitely would have guessed 47 Meters Down with your top one. Um, yeah, no, that's definitely the bottom we had most of the same, and the top we had a good bit the same, and then the middle was very, very different.
Always good to see. I mean, yeah, and like The Invitation is like 1,000 times a better movie than 47 Meters Down. But like you said, if I was just to watch something right now, it would definitely be that.
Yes, 100% agree. I think that's what makes this list fun. It gives a chance for movies that otherwise might not be higher to be put higher because we're of the way we're doing the rankings. So I do think that that makes this fun. Um, I definitely, after this discussion, I really want to rewatch Belko Experiment. So there you go. That's my biggest takeaway from this.
Yeah, a lot of these movies were just movies I feel like I needed to rewatch. So this thing was definitely giving the good recommendations.
Yeah. And hopefully the loyal listeners at home have also had some good recommendations. I know it's not October, but it's spooky season all year round. Please feel free to go get some scares.